Hello, everybody. We are finishing up this rapid fire wrap up series, I guess, with my reading wrap up for October 2024. I didn't have any DNFs this month, which is great, but of the four books that I read from front to back, they ran the full gamut of ratings. So I have to start with the lowest rating, which was my first one-star rating of the year, Jake Reinvented by Gordon Corman. This was a short book. I probably would have DNF'd it had it been longer because I don't typically enjoy reading one-star book. If I feel like a book is going to be one star, I tend to stop it, at least this year. Last year, I didn't do that. I learned my lesson. This is a Great Gatsby retelling. This new kid, Jake, he is making his mark instantly as soon as he comes to F. Scott Fitzgerald High School. He is immediately a member of the football team. He throws these extravagant parties in his dad's mansion. See the comparison there to the Great Gatsby. He's making friends quickly. Everybody wants to get to know this guy. He's just super cool, but some things seem off. Like the fact that he's become so popular so fast being the new kid. Rick wants to find out why. Reading this, it wasn't the fact that it was so similar to The Great Gatsby that I didn't like it. Because going into any retelling, you expect it to be pretty similar, and that didn't bother me at all. In fact, I read this because I wanted specifically to read a retelling of a book that I read earlier this year. And it's another reason why I finished it, too. I didn't want to just DNF this one without, giving it its proper dues after I told myself that I wanted to read a Great Gatsby retelling. This one, though, like with any YA, it had so many pop culture references that bugged me anyway. But the fact that these characters seemed so old-fashioned, there was a disconnect there. I didn't know what time period I was in. This was written in, I believe, the early 2000s. Or maybe the 2010s. I can't remember exactly when this was published, but it was after the year 2000. But these kids seemed like they were stuck decades before this. Maybe 80s at the latest, but sometimes it felt like I was reading about characters who could have been extras in Grease. The dialogue is what made me feel that way. And the fact that Jake kept calling Rick baby every time he said baby, like it was his cool catchphrase. And understanding who Jake is by the end of it, I could get it if the author were to weave it a little bit better. But it just felt like a way too hard attempt to be cool or to make him sound cool. And the whole time he said baby, I was screaming at the book, "You are not cool. Stop." I did not. No. And the fact that he was the subject and there was so much dialogue coming from Jake, I just couldn't do it. I could not be that invested in him, even though there were some moments where I was meant to feel something for him. But gosh, just the constant baby, just every sentence. I couldn't give this more than a 1-star rating. I didn't know what time period I was in. I think these characters were all tryhards. And I believe I found out reading some of the reviews that Gordon Corman is used to writing middle grade. So I guess that would make sense since this was his leap into an older book. But I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it. Wasn't feeling it at all. So let's move on to my 2-star rated book, Gay Werewolf by Tony Santarella. Bored is the word, because I sure was. If you are going to give me a premise, if you were going to give me a title with werewolf in it, if you're going to tell me that this main character is a werewolf, please give me werewolf elements. Please give me werewolf action that I can follow. Don't just let the main character black out and yada yada through the good, violent parts and then wake up in the middle of some random field and tell me, oh, so this happened. That doesn't cut it with me. If you tell me this is about a werewolf, I don't care if he's bored. give me werewolf stuff. They gave me plenty of gay. It delivered on the gay. There were sex scenes. But this is the story of Brian, who's this 25-year-old waiter. And outside of Grinder, he watches Love Island, and if somebody ghosts him, he kills them. That's his whole werewolf thing that we never get to see. And his werewolf side, I guess, is this well-kept secret. He hasn't really told anybody except for his parents. But this guy, this random dude, comes into the restaurant while he's working, and Brian realizes, oh, well, it's not so secret because this dude knows all about him and wants him to join this underground club of werewolves. And I think it also includes other supernatural creatures as well. I can't remember exactly, probably because I was bored. But at the very least, it was a club for werewolves, and he was invited to it. So he attends this club. He befriends this guy named Tyler. And yeah, the story is about his orientation into this club of werewolves who he is allowed to be himself with. All the while, he has his friends also who work at the restaurant. So there's this conflict between them and this new club of werewolves. It's a story of belonging. It has a good theme. I feel like this story, because there were a few scenes that were really impactful and really strong. There's something about this book that makes me think that this author wrote around those scenes. And I can understand thinking of a scene, having a great idea for a scene, and then writing a book around it. I get it. But it felt a bit disconnected from the plot itself. Like, this could have been a story about anything. I don't think it necessarily had to be about werewolves because we didn't really get to see a lot of the werewolf action, a lot of the werewolf pieces that I was promised. And I went into this book, and when I read it, I just felt like it could be about anybody. When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, dual perspective, Sydney and Theo. Sydney has lived in Brooklyn her entire life, but recently she is noticing that white individuals are moving into her neighborhood, and she befriends one of these white individuals named Theo. And Theo, his whole experience is about learning about the space that he has moved into, learning about the people, getting to know everybody. His story is that of growth, while Sydney's is about making sure that the space that she grew up in doesn't lose the character that it's had for so many years. This is a story around gentrification. It's a thriller. Some people have said that it's not that thrilling, and I think it's because it's not that fast-paced. There is a huge romance element, and I do believe that is Alyssa Cole's strength. I was very invested in the romance, which is odd because I'm not usually invested in the romances. But I feel like because it was such a dominant plot line that it was hard to, it's hard to ignore when something's in your face like that. I'm very torn on the romance because on one hand, with this being a thriller, the romance provided a way to tear your guard down. But on the other hand, I feel like it was a negative distraction because I wanted to I wanted to familiarize myself more with the space. I want to know more about the setting. I want her to go to some of these places more often so that I could have an intimate feel where I also live in Brooklyn and understand this environment that is so rapidly changing. I read in some of the reviews that gentrification is one of those things where you don't realize it's happening until it's happening fast and it punches you in the face. And that is more or less what this book does. The ending, as a result, is another part that I am kind of conflicted about. There were some scenes at the end where I felt that there were some character shifts as well, where I couldn't believe that some of the dialogue was coming from some of these characters. I still gave this 4 stars. I think that the tension was there. And I certainly would read another one of Alyssa Cole's thrillers. I just wanted to familiarize myself with the setting a bit more. A little less romance, a little more immersing myself in Sydney's world and what she's familiar with. And it's interesting because I don't really talk about setting so much in these wrap-ups, but I think that setting in this case is such an important thing. I think that Brooklyn itself should have been a character of its own and had a little bit more focus than the romance. Anyway, I'm done talking about this. I need to move on to my 5-star read, Mary by Nat Cassidy. I finally did it. After all my friends have read this, I read it. I'm way behind, but I do feel like it's good that I waited until much later to read this book because I'd forgotten about all of my friends' reviews and what they had to say, so it felt like I was coming into this with a fresh perspective. This is about Mary, who is a middle-aged woman going through perimenopause. She's invisible. Her coworkers don't notice her. Society doesn't notice her, and that's one of the major themes of this book. She has her loved ones that always greet her when she comes home. Her loved ones are little figurines. Unfortunately, I related to that way too well. Except my loved ones are my cats. So she doesn't really start seeing the apparitions or hearing the voices really until she goes to visit and take care of her awful Aunt Nadine, who honestly was my biggest gripe of this book. I couldn't take very much of Nadine. She was awful to Mary. She was very verbally abusive. You do get introduced early on in the very beginning. I think it's a prologue. We're in the perspective of a police officer. Please correct me if I'm wrong, where they are uncovering clues for a murder that has taken place. There's a serial killer on the loose, and they're trying to figure out who did it. And that's what sets the scene. It moves us into Mary's perspective, and then from there, that's all I'm gonna say. Actually, no. That's not all I'm gonna say. The small town vibe in this was super creepy. I wasn't really feeling the thriller vibes or the horror vibes. I don't know what this book is marketed as originally, but after she went to go see Nadine and all of the stuff that was happening with the small town vibe especially and how these people think, that's when I was like, okay, I get it now. This is starting to make sense. It's very strange, very odd. I don't know if this is one of those books that I'm going to put on my best of 2024 lists. I know that a lot of my friends did. In fact, I think all of them did. I don't know if it's quite there for me yet, but the more I think about it, the more enjoyment I'm feeling. It's like coming out, if you can't tell from just my voice alone. So I don't know. I'm going to have to consider a little bit more. It was a 5-star rating. I don't have very many gripes. It's just Nadine, who was supposed to be this unlikable character. But yeah, if you are encouraged to read any of these books, their Goodreads links are in the description below. Click on those and head on over to the retailer of your choice and purchase them if you're feeling brave, or check them out at your local library or use your library app if they are available. If you enjoyed this video for whatever reason, do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading, and we're finished with the wrap-ups of the year, so November's next.